Right, guys, I'm the world around you, and this is Pause for Thought on Fresh Old FM. Now, I've not had internet for a few days. I've got it back right now as I'm saying this, but as I wrote me a little introduction, I didn't have internet, and while I was researching the show, if you like, and writing it up, and I didn't have internet because it turns out our upstairs neighbour is a secret hoarder. He's been storing bin bags of shite and old push bikes and that on his flat roof directly above our dining room, which is where we keep the internet router, and this has sort of led, with that coupled with the strong wind and that and the rain from the past couple of nights, it's led to a nice little festive leak in my dining room, so water pissing through the dining room ceiling and that, so unfortunately I couldn't do any research for the show this week, so it's going to be a movie madness episode, but not in Kieran's voice, not like this. I'm going to do it in my normal voice because I think this would be very irritating. I might 1 week do a voice in Kieran's voice for the whole episode, but it really fucking takes it out of me and makes my throat feel weird. And I start hearing the voice sometimes while I'm thinking, which is really strange, so I probably won't do that for a while. Anyway, I dug out my old DVDs, and it was a toss-up between either this film or Saving Private Ryan, and see as now when I do like an hour and a half film, it takes me about 3 or 4 hours to get through it. I didn't really fancy dragging myself through what I presume would have been about 8 hours of Saving Private Ryan. So, this week, we're looking into the hidden messages behind the Simpsons movie. Obviously, everyone's already well aware that the Simpsons writers are time travellers, and I imagine this is a film that everyone's, done one of these on, probably always been done to death, So, but it was either this or just me chatting shit for an hour about absolutely fucking whatever came into my mind with no research and no idea where I was going to go with it. Which, to be honest, sounds like it could have been fun. Probably would have been quite hard, and I might do that next week just for the sake of it, just to see if I can, now that I've thought about it. Anyway, let's have a song to start off with, and then we'll get right into the film. So, here's the new one from Bugsy Malone. This is Cold Nights and the sixth one. So it's been years since I've watched a DVD, innit? I don't know about you, and it's mad remembering that there used to be adverts on them, at the start. Like on this one, there's an advert for Sky One, there's one for Futurama, and another one for Alvin and the Chipmunks, starring Jason Lee. A film that I don't remember ever happening, but I think Jason Lee's a pretty good actor, innit? Like I like My Name Is Earl. I enjoyed all the Kevin Smith films that I've seen. Anyway, immediately the film, the Simpsons movie. Immediately the film focuses on the moon, mate. Fucking the moon. Every fucking week, mate, the moon comes up in it. Every single week. Zooming in towards the moon as well. Just like in The Lion King, in The Little Mermaid, in The Last Airbender. Is this something that happens in every single film? Or is someone trying to get coded messages out to me, or maybe to you? Maybe these messages hidden in films aren't directed at me personally. Maybe they're directed at you. So if you've listened to every episode of Pause for Thought so far, then you could be the person that all these messages are intended for. Or maybe they're not intended for you directly, but maybe you're supposed to share these messages with your children, sit them down in the front room, or just as they're falling asleep, and tell them everything that you've learnt from me so far. Apparently though, subliminal messaging doesn't work, innit? Like, neither does learning in your sleep either. So, abattoir. The pig was slaughtered in the abattoir. That's actually a lie though, that the Simpsons, that they tried to push on us back in, I think it was season 3 or season 4, because I remember having it on video. I think it was the green box, which makes me think season 3, but I could be wrong. Again, I've currently got no internet whilst I'm writing this up, so it was, anyway, in the episode, it was a tape that Marge bought for Homer to help him with weight loss, but instead he ended up listening to a tape that expands your vocabulary. But saying that though, maybe the message that they were trying to get across is that subliminal messaging doesn't have the desired effects. Maybe listening to a 5-hour tape of someone convincing you to eat healthily doesn't work. Not in the sense that it'll have the effect that it'll make you eat healthily, but maybe it had the effects that it changed the way the person would talk, or the words they would use, or even that internal dialogue, Maybe listening to people talk as you sleep is a great way to fuck up your own thoughts, or to allow your own thoughts and imaginings to become contaminated. And if you're sick of thinking, allow me and the other hosts from Fresh Old FM to fill your heads with new thoughts. Buy some bad taxidermy. Maybe, for other people, they just want to feel not as lonely. And a good way to not feel lonely is to pretend there's a stranger sat next to your bed whispering to you while you sleep. Nothing says relaxing atmosphere like a dark room, an unconscious person, messages while you sleep, and the voice of a weird little taxidermist Mancunian lad in the corner. Anyway, I got distracted there. So I'm not even 25 seconds into the film. We're seeing Scratchy land on the moon, the first cat in space. But is this the second conspiracy reference of the film so far, 30 seconds in? Scratchy, known cartoon cat in the Simpsons universe, is on the moon. Are they saying the moon landing wasn't real? And just to rub it in, they're showing a moon landing that must be fictitious. Scratchy says, "We come in peace." And at that moment, his prey, Itchy, the mouse, stabs him with a flagpole through the stomach and cracks his helmet open, killing the cat and returning to Earth in the craft that the cat came in. Could there be more to this here? Like, are they saying that we went to the moon with a species that we consider to be below us? Or is it as in like we're the whites, like the tall whites from the other week, like the Venusians, and that we're using the greys just in the same way here that it seems like Scratchy has used Itchy. So in this reference, Scratchy would be the tall whites, Itchy would be the greys. Anyway, that's just going to confuse things in it already. Or is it saying anyway that we met another species on the moon that we then looked down upon, even though we'd literally spent eternity looking up to them? Nice bit of philosophy there for you. And did this creature give us the runaround and then came back to Earth disguised as the original crew? Because Itchy's in the same clothes as Scratchy. And maybe that's why over the past 10 years or so there's been a massive thing in films about aliens, but not aliens like, oh, look at these little green men. I mean like aliens as in the sense that like the symbiote from Venom and that, a creature that can enter our bodies without us knowing, or almost like the hushed tones of Dr. Marvin Monroe slipping into Homer's ear on a night time, you know. Maybe they travel on electrical currents though, or radiation waves. Maybe they came back to Earth from the moon in the 60s and forced the humans to create more and more technologies until they were covering the whole Earth with different networks, almost like neural pathways in a brain, helping the moon creatures to take over Earth. Maybe that's what the ethereal entities are. Maybe they all came from the moon. Or maybe they exiled the smartest or most dangerous one of them to the moon, imprisoned in the vacuum of space, to try and stop them from coming to Earth and interfering with the humans and the ethereal entities that were left to fend for themselves. Maybe that's where we get rocket technology from. Perhaps there was an invisible hand guiding the Nazi party attached to an invisible body that was working with lots of other invisible creatures to gift the technology of rockets to anyone that would listen, in the hopes that they'd test the technology by going to the moon and inadvertently rescuing their evil leader. Not only that, like, that's quite simple, innit? That it's believable, mate. It's not that complicated, innit, when you think about it. Itchy then becomes president of the United States, the leader of the so-called quote-unquote free world, but Itchy's running with Hillary Clinton. Now, is this a subtle way of the Simpsons writers claiming that Hillary is working with the moon mice to help them get into power to control the world? Itchy then starts to hear sounds coming from the moon, frequencies travelling through space directly heard by the leader of a country. What more evidence do we need that there is some form of controlling or governing force running at least America from within the moon? The cat threatens to spill the beans, so Itchy decides to launch the missiles at the moon, which kills the cat, but not the moon. Actually, what happens is the cat ingests all of the rockets, and what finishes him off is a special rocket that releases a shoe that kicks the cat, causing him to die. Maybe this is the Simpsons writers' way of telling us that to destroy the maleficent moon mice is, you know, to kick them away, kick them to the side, ignore them, and they just go away. Much like in that Treehouse of Horror episode of The Simpsons where they sang Just Don't Look about all the adverts that were coming to life by Bad Taxidermy. It shows Green Day singing the theme to the show, and they're surrounded by Duff adverts. Now, was this saying that these bands that are seen as, you know, counterculture are also owned by the corporations that they're pretending to be against? They claim to have been singing for 3 hours, and now they want to talk about the environment, but we've only seen them sing for 10 seconds, so maybe they're not to be trusted. We don't have a clue what they plan to say is based in truth or reality at all. The crowd feel the same and start chucking rocks at the band, which shows really that if you're paying to hear something, you don't really want a preachy undertone, or even worse, a blatant push of an agenda, which, you know, is something I always bear in mind when trying to advertise me Bad Taxidermy or me books like Uneducated Guesses Volume 1 or How to Date an Antique Table, A Lover's Guide. No one asks to be told about them, so I don't bring it up. You'll hear about, you know, you hear to learn more about like what hidden messages are in the Simpsons movie and The Last Airbender and all that, innit? Not what you can get for less than £20 English from www.worldaroundyou.com. I think Green Day are about to meet Blinky in the lake, you know, that three-eyed fish. It turns out I know quite a lot about The Simpsons character-wise, which has surprised me, because I've not really watched it for a while. Anyway, like Green Day, they look like they're about to meet the fish in the lake, because the float starts to dissolve. And the next scene is a message from God saying to switch off your mobile phones. Now this harkens back to what I was saying about technology creating pathways for entities to travel around that they can use to interact with us through. Why else would God be telling us to turn our phones off? You know, outside the church, the sign that they put outside the Springfield church, it says turn off your phones. Now Homer says that he doesn't believe God is real, and he says he's phony. Could this be to try and make people think that only idiots, like Homer, wouldn't believe in God? The Lord's light then shines on Abe, who starts ranting and raving about horrible things that are going to happen. Now, is this the idea that old people are aware of something coming? And could that be because they've already seen bad stuff happen and can recognise the pattern? Twisted tail, 1,000 eyes, trapped forever, time is short, Eeper, Eeper, Eeper. Believe me, is that's the gist of Abe's message. Grandpa, you know. Now, Eeper could be an anagram of P, which is something that vegans eat a lot of. Now, those vegans could have something to do with it, but we'll have to wait and see. Twisted tail might refer to how a story has been altered, possibly by 500 people, because that would then explain the 1,000 eyes. And by twisting the story of, let's say, the story of God, it has caused people to become trapped in this reality that we're in, or prevented people from actually dying, meaning that it's possible that reincarnation is only happening because they've all been trapped here because they don't understand how to properly access the afterlife or other planes of existence. And guess what? We're only fucking 5 minutes into the film as well. There's already been fucking loads to unpack. Now, is it possible that this could be the first two-parter episode of Pause for Thought? We'll have to see. I don't know if I'm going to get through all this, but we'll see how it goes. Abe's then rolled up in a carpet to restrict his movements, but someone that is known for rolling people up in carpets is the Mafia. The Mafia had lots of ties to the Vatican during World War II, so could the Mafia be a modern-day equivalent of the Templars or something like that? The so-called Holy Warriors. Their initiation supposedly has something to do with saints and blood rituals, so that already seems pretty shady. Did the Mafia get rid of people that try to spread the truth? Will the Mafia be coming for me and Jimmy Budd after our 7pm slot on Truth Seeking for Threshold FM every Thursday? Or is it more to do with the red carpet in the scene, though? Maybe what the writers are trying to say is that the red carpet is a way to restrict the people with knowledge about the truth of God through NDAs, which is another three-letter abbreviation, a lot like EPA or EPA, and through contracts that restrict the topics that people can talk about openly, you know, like the non-disclosure agreements, and that's what an NDA is. Anyway, because although Abe was putting on a performance that's gripped the church, he can no longer move or gesture to get people's attention, only speak, and a news source becomes a lot less reliable if you're receiving it from someone wrapped up in cloth, especially if that person that you're receiving the news from is wrapped up in carpet. Like, you're not going to believe that, are you? And that is why we have such phrases as the naked truth. Abe even thanks the church for listening, almost like it was all for show and he's just grateful for the attention, kinda like celebrities are seen to be. Homer described what happened to his father as a so-called senior moment, but what if old people are like children and that they're more susceptible to the afterlife, and that's why old people are a lot nicer and middle-aged than young adults, because they're re-aware of the extra world around them rather than blinkered or just plain ignorant. Homer's got a list of chores which include removing a hornet's nest and fixing a sinkhole. In 2020 there were huge fucking murder hornets knocking about, mate. And there's even been an episode about bees on Black Mirror that used the signals put in the earth by technology. Now, could have this been where the writer of Black Mirror got his idea from? Did he watch the first 7 minutes of the Simpsons movie and get the same as me? We'll never know. But sinkholes are relevant though, because since this film came out, we've had an influx of sinkholes in the UK, appearing all over the country, even to the point that there are TV shows about them on like Channel 5, you know, like reputable stations and that. Homer plugs the sinkhole with Maggie, his little girl, for those of you that have never owned a television. And that kind of relates to what I was saying about the old people and younger people a minute ago, innit? Maggie is seen as the solution, if you like, to the problem of an unseen enemy. Just like Grandpa was aware of the problem, but the middle generation doesn't want to be responsible for fixing the problems, so passes the blame onto the older generation, and also at the same time shifts the responsibility of fixing the problem to the younger people of society. Then we see something very, very important for modern society. Homer strangles Bart in retaliation for him finding something funny, which, 12 years after the release of this film, is something that has come into the real world. Constantly, people are berated for finding things funny, especially for laughing at the expense of another person, albeit programs like You've Been Framed still exist, so it's okay to laugh at people being physically hurt, and sometimes what looks like, in some of the clips on You've Been Framed, what looks like people receiving lifelong conditions as a result of what gets captured on film. And in our modern society, it's okay to laugh at a person as they break their neck or get run over by a car or watch someone's last moments before entering a vegetative state. But if you talk about the condition by name or even reference the newly developed condition, it's no longer funny. Even though all that's happened is it's been a little bit more descriptive. It's no longer deemed funny. But it is funny whilst it happens, which is an important lesson for everyone. Stuff is funny in context. Sometimes it's not, sometimes it is. Sometimes certain things are funnier when taken out of context. If something is or was funny in the moment, I don't understand in all honesty how you can go back and say that that same thing is no longer funny. I understand that expectations for jokes change, I get that, but if you watch some of these new shows or watch, on BBC Two where they show food from like the 1950s, where it looks like fucking jarred frankenfurters in jelly set on a bed of cheese, I'd look at that personally and I'd say that that's not a proper meal, but back then it was enjoyed, to be fair. So maybe the problem is that there's a record of everything. Maybe keeping record of everything is what brings on the downfall of civilization. There was loads of stuff about the Library of Alexander, wasn't there? And then that empire started to fall. Maybe that's what DVDs, VHSs, them little tiny discs that were only really used for GameCubes and weird little devices, Betamax, YouTube even. Well, maybe that's what all that will be referred to in 1,000 years. People will speak of BitChute like it was the final straw on the back of the camel that was society. Anyway, back to The Simpsons. Almost as if to solidify what I was just saying, Homer causes Bart to slide down the roof and hold on for dear life while simulating an earthquake. Then Ned says something about, what if it cripples the boy? And Homer tells him to shut up whilst hammering Bart's fingers to make him let go of the drain pipe and fall to the patio. Now, is Ned supposed to be the perfect person? The person that would make Itchy and his human running partner proud? You know, the leaders of the country. Would Ned make them proud? Is that what they want? They want Ned's the self-censoring, God-fearing health freak who stops families from enjoying their time with one another. Now, next scene, and Lisa's getting about spreading a misinformation campaign about the pollution in Lake Springfield, and she's getting doors slammed in her face left, right and centre, and fucking rightfully so, I've got to say. And then we've got Nelson force Milhouse to say that global warming is a myth and that further study is needed. And then he hits him in the belly for saying that because he's gone against what he genuinely seemed to believe, or what he was pretending to believe, to try and get in Lisa's, well, probably not getting a dress, they're a bit young, aren't they? To hold her hand, let's keep it, relatively nice. Was this scene though with Nelson, this back and forth, this little exchange here, is that to scare people into thinking it's wrong to say that global warming is a myth? Or is it to scare people away from suggesting there needs to be more research into global warming? It's ironic really, isn't it? Because if we had records of temperatures from all throughout time, we'd be able to tell if it was true or not. But then if we did have all those records, how would we know what had or hadn't been redacted? And how could the controlling force of the world control us if we had access to limitless information? Nelson says the sucker punch was for selling out his beliefs, but I think that's just a trick, to stop people thinking so much about it. Lisa then hears some young kids spouting out the same rhetoric that she's been reciting. A lot like what I imagine God people do, or cultists, or what vegans do with each other. They sniff their own arseholes, innit, and then when they see someone else sniffing their own arsehole, they offer to do a quick swapsies and then bum off each other for a bit because they both know the same things. But why would anyone want to talk to you if you're just going to say the same shit that they already know? Why would you even want to listen to someone who knows all the same things as you? All that does is limits what you know and solidifies your own beliefs, no matter if it's true or not, like David Icke says, a lot of this comes from all the way that the reptilian ghosts interact with our spinal cords, and personally, I'm inclined to agree. Now, after a bit of an exchange between Lisa and this young lad, we learn that he's Irish. So here we have a small country coming to a larger country to spread propaganda. Now, they want to make it very clear that Colin isn't a relation of Bono's, but what if there's more to this? What if we tie this with the Green Day scene from the beginning? Is it trying to show us that the media that we consume directly influences our view of the world? Musicians trying to tell everyone about pollution and global warming, and a movie at the beginning showing America reaching the moon and showing how great America is. Maybe different types of messaging is better in different types of media. The next scene has Marge trying to decode the messages from Grandpa with the comic book guy in the kitchen. Now, the fat guy's got an idea for what EPA means or what it stands for, and he thinks it's got something to do with Green Lantern, who is an alien of sorts, in a way. Anyway, Marge disregards his idea, and is this to make people think that the comics and TV shows aren't a place to learn from? Is it trying to dumb people down and stop people from finding links in the nuggets of information left for us by writers after the production teams have decimated the plot to fit in adverts, product placements, and pop culture references? In the next scene, we see Bart, a child, using a Mark 500k air rifle to shoot working-class Homer as he struggles to carry around Stoutland brand bricks. At least 17 of those bricks, 5 lines of 3 and a single line of 2 with one line jutted out. Now, I'm not sure of a direct reference, but if you use all of this information here, for example, you take 17 and double it and minus the 1 from the top row, you get 33. There are, I think, 33 levels to Freemasonry. Masons use bricks, and by having the bricks lay like this, it almost resembles a pyramid. In actuality, though, there are 51 bricks on Homer's back, which is possibly in reference to the calendar. There are 52 weeks in a year, but if we minus the one that gets us to, from the top line, that gets us 51. So is it possible that this is a reference to the fault in our calendars, something that I've brought up in the past when I've talked about George Eastman from Kodak and his altered calendar? That'd have one less day in it, innit? So a calendar with one less week seems like it could be believable in one way or another. Anyway, I've been talking for quite a while here, so let's have a song. This is Low Key, Akala and Black the Ripper with I Still Believe 2020. Just going to take like 20 seconds, 30 seconds of your time, guys. I thought I'd put these in the middle so you don't just cut them off at the end and they don't become annoying. If you can, follow us on any social media you can. Send us in messages to your friends. Send links to this show if you've enjoyed it. Send links to me book, snippets from me book, or if you're really feeling kind, join us Patreon. You'll find links for it in the description below. Let's carry on with the show. I don't want to take up too much of your time, like I say, man of me word and that. Homer then encourages Bart to roam the city naked as a dare. Now, could this have been readying people for a push of nonsense led by the mainstream media? It was already happening in the early 2000s when they'd get singers to look like children and that, in like fucking school uniforms and stuff and sexy them up a bit. But now it's even more in people's minds because of weird movements like those pedos that want kiddie fiddling to supposedly be included within the LGBTQ movement, which is pretty fucked. Anyway, Bart gets tied up to be publicly humiliated outside of a Krusty Burger whilst he's naked and tied to a lamppost. But it's Nelson that's doing the humiliating, a guy that's just punished Milhouse for not sticking with his beliefs. And then, as Bart has done something, possibly because it was something he was told to do rather than something he chose to do, now Nelson is punishing Bart for that. But he's clearly been there for hours, because he goes from going ha ha, ha ha to like that. So he's been there for a while, innit? Now that makes me think that Nelson might be mentally disturbed, and maybe what the Simpsons is trying to teach us is that if we don't do whatever it is that we want to do, then some of the special needs people are going to come and punish us at lampposts while we're tied up naked, which that's a strange lesson really, innit, for the Simpsons to be trying to teach you for what is normally quite a wholesome cartoon. It's pretty dark for the Simpsons. Anyway, going back to my original point earlier about this whole film seems to be about how one generation passes the blame onto another generation. Bart tells Homer to tell Officer Wiggum that the dare was his fault, but Homer refuses to take responsibility and blames Bart for it. And there's a little link to vegans again. Homer tells Krusty's production crew that they can't kill a pig if it's wearing people clothes, which is pretty much most vegans' arguments when they say, you wouldn't eat your dog but you'd eat a chicken. Their point being, that a dog is more relatable than a chicken. But to be honest, like, I would probably eat a dog, innit? Like, and I probably have eaten dogs in the past. I grew up on a council estate and I used to go to the chippies there, so I probably have eaten dog. And I'm pretty sure that the majority of the world eat dogs as well, so I don't get the problem with that. Marge tells Homer to get rid of the pig. Now, this could be more vegan propaganda, making people believe that we need to get rid of pigs, cattle and poultry because of the message from God. In the next few moments, we get shown a sort of industrialised fishing scene as Homer electrocutes a pond full of fish in a flashback caused by Ned Flanders, the Godhead. Again, adding the idea that you're probably a bad parent if you support farming or wide-scale animal slaughter, as the vegans call it. Though, in dialogue, it's really just Flanders trying to make Bart feel bad about having a shit dad, which adds to the paedophilic undertones from the naked skateboarding, because Flanders was involved with that as well. We've now got a God-fearing church fella who, by definition of being into religion, is more likely to have occultist beliefs, trying to talk to a young boy that he's seen naked about dangling maggots. I mean, you literally couldn't fucking write this, guys. Bart is then swayed by the neighbour, Flanders, and agrees to go fishing with the man who just kissed two sleeping children and rubbed one of their groins with a handheld hoover. And what do hoovers do? Hoovers suck. The symbolism here is fucking insane. Bart refuses to drink the cup of cocoa from Ned, claiming it's for wussies, but he quickly goes and drinks it once he's turned his back. Now, could this be showing us how Big T is still alive and well, and show us how, like using hot drinks, they're using hot drinks to sissify the children of America? No more drinking a can of Coke or cordial and tap water, but hot drinks with mountains of foam on top. Fucking lady drinks, mate. This little back and forth with a very camp, "Oh my God," from Bart. Maybe religion isn't there to keep us on the straight and narrow. Maybe it's to keep us away from the true God, whatever that may be, because why else would Flanders work so hard to get a child to use the Lord's name in vain? Next we hear Lisa claiming the best part of Colin's existence is that he isn't imaginary. Then we see Homer chanting Spider Pig and walking the pig upside down in the living room. Now, this seems like a little nod to genetic modifications and animal splicing, doesn't it, really? Immediately after hearing the words not imaginary, like, why else would they then include Spider Pig if it wasn't to slowly trickle the idea of human hybrids and animal hybridisation into the minds of the masses? Just as Bart's getting bored on his trip with Flanders, he expects to get choked by him for dropping his fishing rod, but Flanders says the phrase, "I think the only time you should lay hands on a boy is when you're giving him a good old pat on the back." But before pat on the back, he waves his hand around almost to insinuate he means a Tommy Tank or a good old ham shank, a fiddle of his piddle, to masturbate where some might fillet. Again, another nod to noncery. Bart looks traumatised initially, then acts as if he enjoyed it, which could have been trying to condition children to enjoy their fishing trips alone with their single, older male neighbours. We then see a lorry labelled with flop sweats, which I don't understand, but then there's a crazy cat lady simulating masturbating, and a dump of beer bottles all into the lake's edge as Lisa looks on. Now, this is the lake that they're fishing in as well. So, is this showing what is corrupting the world? Clowns, masturbation, alcoholism, or is it trying to show the three possible ways Bart will try to overcome this potentially traumatic event with Mr. Flanders, through either becoming a comic, masturbating in public, or turning to drink? In the next scene, more weird sexual undertones come to the surface. Mayor Quimby agrees that the young boy, Colin, is in fact dreamy, all whilst this is veiled with talks on pollution. Are the writers of The Simpsons here trying to show that politicians will agree with the global warming stuff peddled by the extremists or corporate people or big companies because of paedophilic notions or actions? We know that on Epstein's Island there was video evidence being taken of people having sex, and that some of these people having sexual encounters were alleged to be underage. So could the Simpsons movie be alluding to this in a very, very subtle way? This scene is very clever because then the clown Krusty, another celebrity probably owned by the corporations, claims that they need to buy a new scissor lift. Maybe this is what happens. Maybe Krusty is a kiddie diddler too. Maybe he and Quimby, who is a known sexual deviant in the series, have been bought by the global warming agenda people, and they're using them to persuade the town to spend money on machines or products. products like the scissor lift, all under the guise of global warming. But really, the global warming is just a veil, a way to disguise money changing hands. And the blackmailing with the nonces is a good way to make sure that these influential people will always be in their pocket. Lisa is described in the papers as a nagging girl saving a town, which you can draw similarities to another young girl who attempted to save the world from global warming in the past year or so. There is even a scene with the Mafia too, so as Fat Tony tries to dump a body in the water. So could this be from earlier when I mentioned the Mafia? Maybe the writers wanted to wait to include them so that we wouldn't put two and two together. But we have. They weren't expecting this, guys. Yeah, man, I won't take too much of your time because I know that it's annoying, but now I understand why people actually do this, innit? I thought, want the show to grow. Realistically, all I need you to do is share a link to this show around, or the show that you've enjoyed the most. Send it to your mum, your nan, your sister, your mates. I mean, it doesn't have to be a woman. You could send it to your brother or your uncle as well, you know. Just spread it around a bit, mate. That's the best thing you can do for us. Yeah, I'll let you crack on. Thanks for listening, man. Next, in the film, we see the Bumblebee man kiss a donkey for money, and like he pays the money. He doesn't get paid money for kissing a donkey. You know, it's not like a donkey show. He's like a kissing booth. And then Homer and the pig exchange a little flirty moment on the couch. Now, is this to normalise the idea of half human, half animal hybrids knocking about, or people with advanced skills or powers brought on by being mixed with animal DNA in a test tube or in a woman's womb? Another nod to hybridised DNA, perhaps. Marge starts rattling off about fucking how the waste of animals needs to be disposed of correctly. This is exactly what I was talking about earlier with all that stuff about Mayor Quimby. The idea of problem, reaction, solution. There was a problem. That problem was pollution in the lake, put there by a nuclear power plant, which weirdly is supposed to be the greenest type of power production. But anyway, there was a reaction to this problem. They reacted by cleaning the lake. But the solution to it all is to implement a hazardous treatment centre, which they're out now in the scene all queuing for around the block, and I'll bet you a quid that they're going to be charging the people of Springfield for fucking using that. They'll be charging them for using it, mate. So they're benefiting from the lake pollution. When something that seems like an obvious bit of brainwashing happens as well in this film, they always put on a daft little joke too, or a little silly bit at the end of it. See, after seeing Homer driving around with Harry Plopper the pig, Chief Wiggum almost shoots himself in the head saying, "Whoops, that was close," because he's fucking eating donuts off the barrel of his pistol, or barrel of his revolver. Now, is this to get an emotion reaction out of the viewer in order to cement what they've just seen in their brain, or is it to punctuate the end of the point that the writers were making? We then see that Homer dumping shit in the lake literally causes the squirrel to mutate, very quickly too. So, could this be saying that all the pollution in our atmosphere has been put there on purpose to terraform the Earth, and to therefore manipulate our DNA to cause us to evolve? Is that why people are looking older, younger? Is this fact that of people looking older, younger, that is causing the rise in noncery around the world? Do old people just think children look older, and that they actually are older because of the pollution? Or are the Simpsons writers literally telling us that there are things in the water that alter your DNA? In the next scene, we see a film star in charge of the White House. I mean, we're yet to see this in the real world, but it's a possibility, you know. Next, we see lots of helicopters bringing a glass dome to cover a town, encasing them. Marge says part of the prophecy forcing Abe to say the crazy old man in church was right. What if they're trying to tell us that the end of days, according to the Bible, is on its way? Or that it's going to look like the end of days, but in actual fact it'll be some weird government initiative? After all, the president in the film was given 5 options. So that means they potentially want to test out another 4 elsewhere. What if that's all that countries are? Like, we learned at the start of the film that the president came from the moon, and the president is now a film star. So apart from that extra nod to the moon landing being faked, we also have the idea that something came from the moon, or space in general, and started experimenting on the Earth. We then see a bloke appear on a screen, literally telling people, "I'm on a big screen, just listen." Then the bloke in charge of the EPO says he also owns the company that makes the domes. It's showing how rich people use politics to make more money and keep control. It then shows how they can use technology such as GPS systems to no longer show that a place exists. Like, how do we know they haven't done that with entire continents or countries? Not many of us have ever seen these places from above with our own eyes, like from a space station or something. So There might not even be fucking C's, mate. C's might not exist. I'm not saying that the alphabet goes A, B, D. I mean, like, the fucking wet bits that the moon drags around. Like, because fucking... That might be the biggest lie about the moon, mate. That it controls the seas. Because if you link two massive lies, then people will believe both of them. Like, with your average yes ladder. Maybe there's just big rivers or lakes between so-called continents, and the majority of the Earth is actually ground. Like every single other planet that exists, like every planet that we get shown is all dry, innit? There's no water, there's no moisture on them, it's just dry. It's either rock hard or gas, it's not a mixture of a few. Maybe we're in the dome, though, and it's only us, or only... Maybe not only us that exist, but only we know we exist. Like, we're not aware of other people because we're inside the dome. Maybe the rest of the planet as well is completely unaware of the dome and the dome's existence. Homer's watching a TV show that is very self-referential, constantly mentioning the dome itself, just like how there are now corporations that have become verbs in the English dictionary. So could we already be underneath a dome, but the dome is see-through and imaginary, a sort of restriction put on us like what we're told is on the internet in some foreign countries. Now, could these foreign countries all be made up so that we think we have it better inside of the dome? Think about your evidence for this. Like, you see snippets of things on TV, innit? But in reality, they may only film these 3-minute clips and whatever else, to make up a news story, and it could just all be a fake news story. But in reality, they might only film like 3 minutes of it, and rather than a 20-minute interview, and take 3 minutes out of it. Like, just to stop us from realising that we're inside of a dome. Like, I've never followed the Prime Minister around or the President of the United States. Like, they don't put a GoPro on his head, do they, and give us fucking 24/7 access to Boris Cam. Like, maybe he doesn't exist. Maybe they're just actors who speak, and the original writers for these characters have gotten old and started to become fucking senile, and that's why world leaders all seem like something from some form of child's fever dream. We then see that Maggie can escape the dome through some form of sinkhole, but could we also read into this as a portal? We see Homer himself in the reflection, and for a moment we do see two Homers, so could all this together be about there being a parallel world that is connected by some form of hole that can take you from this regulated dome-like institution to the wild side of the other side of the dome, which is represented as the woods in the film? Could this be what Stargates actually are? Are they using Stargates to somehow fill one reality with the people from both to create a reality with less people in it? Like what the Georgia Guidestones suggest? Or could it be so that they can prepare the other world to make way for more domes? It might not be any of this though. Like, because earlier we see Professor Frink claim that the perfect technology lies just outside of the dome. So could that be what the sinkhole represents? The portal to a world with advanced technology? One place that we see this a lot, a lot of advanced technology, that's in video games, innit? And this sinkhole is discovered and then covered over with a sand pit, a phrase commonly used in video games. Now, this coupled with Homer seeing his reflection makes me think that video games could be windows to alternative realities. Maybe the production teams aren't actually making a game, they're just sort of controlling. What you control in a game might not be the actual character. Maybe you're just controlling like a fucking drone in that world, and all of the drones are programmed so that the drones can't see the other drones in that. And it's like a fucking guided tour of that planet, and a retelling of a historical event from that world. Now, maybe the production teams are actually interplanetary politicians who have had to iron out agreements between the other worlds to see what they're actually allowed to let us see. Because I'm thinking this with the reflections, because television's reflecting it just like the dome reflected Homer. After a few subtle references to corporations being in control, we then see a witch hunt that is led by the media. The whole town decides they're going to kill Homer after Kent Brockman suggests vigilantism. Flanders saves them from the mob by using a big wooden plank. Another way that this film is now symbolising a link between two very different worlds, whilst, yet again, symbolising a fully grown man coercing a child to spend time with him, this time literally getting him into his bedroom. The Simpsons are then saved from arrows by the pig, and Homer finds a leftover shrimp and considers it to be lucky. But if you remember the shrimp episode, it's very likely that all of this was in fact funded by the shrimps, the krill, to make them look good in just this very short scene. it's also another example of having a thickly veiled serious message followed by a quick joke to punctuate the end of the message. Now, the family escape through the sinkhole, but the sinkhole gets attacked by the mob and starts to expand, just like how you would imagine a Stargate to react if you started shooting at that. The hole sucks half the house in, and then a cuckoo bird coos from the clock, almost as if to say you're even fucking crazy for thinking about this. The writers fucking taunt the switched-on observer, or are they simply trying to tell us that it's nearly time? Homer claims that Alaska is the way forward, the best way to start over, saying that he can't start life alone and that he's really come to like the family, almost like he is aware that he is the spirit of an ethereal being trapped inside of a meat cage that has been living alongside other meat-caged ethereal beings. Maybe he knows that they've now escaped Xenu's domes, that they can be free to be the ghosts of dead aliens again, except Homer doesn't want to be the ghost of a dead alien again, because they no longer need the domes. They've been battered though and pushed down for long enough that they've forgotten their true form. Homer even says it. He doesn't think. He just tries to make the days hurt less until he can crawl back into bed with Marge. And that's pretty much, what anyone does and what everyone wants, innit? Is that because we're all under the dome? Maybe we slipped out of the dome without even knowing, but because it's a parallel world, everything looks the same. But there was never a dome in one world, and that's where all these opposing thoughts on political correctness and social justice warriors come from. Maybe they're from a world that was never under a dome, whereas other people from the other world only ever knew of life in the dome, and they're confused as to why people are so vehement and on ensuring people's happiness, whereas the dome dwellers learn to accept the world is what it is, and you should just make your own life worth living, whereas the hippies or the social justice warriors lived in a world without restrictions, and they can't understand where these new restrictions have come from. Maybe there's a third world, an artificial world, and people from both of these parallel dimensions have been dumped in there. It's hard to know, innit? But my parallel universe theory starts to hold its own in a scene in a petrol station, because there's a wanted poster of the family on the wall, but Bart alters it, and then these people appear behind him out of nowhere, looking like deformed alternatives of Homer, Marge, Maggie, Bart and Lisa, almost like the Simpsons are now in a parallel world. What if The Simpsons and a lot of other TV shows are just stories about special operatives that have been sent on missions through space portals, and the things that they saw there or were able to do? That's what the episodes are all about, because I imagine that even if you entered a world through a portal, the inhabitants of that world probably would allow you to meet presidents and prime ministers and go to the moon and travel the world and meet famous people, all like Homer Simpson does in the series. Then we see that Mr. Burns still has the power, and he's willing to sell it. He's got literal power, and he's got electricity as well, and he's willing to sell that power. So it makes him a slumlord now. Maybe that's all rich people are, though, just the slumlords of our domes. Maybe the ultra rich that we've started to hear about are from outside of the domes, but I'm not sure. I haven't really got any evidence for anything like that. But we then see literally two different versions of Alaska. One that's full of oil derricks. Then the family spin around loads, and then they're in a different Alaska. The spin is brought on by slipping on the ice, innit? But when I imagine a portal or a Stargate, I imagine spinning colours and that. So then in Alaska, we see how weather can be influenced by vibrations. Could this be a nod to HARP, the weather manipulation devices? And that we got that technology from the other reality, other technologies, such as the weather weapons. It's worth mentioning purely because it's all over the screen constantly, and at this point it's really fucking put under your nose. The dome and the surveillance equipment come from a company in the film called Cargill, which is led by a guy named Russ Cargill, who now works for the EPA, for EPA. But it's weird, isn't it, that there's a real Cargill in the real world and that they could get away with this just as a little, like, putting that in there, making out that they're evil. It's fucking mad that they could do that. Now, there is a little skit about being able to visit the new Grand Canyon too, which is another nod to parallel dimensions. Realistically, it's because they're going to blow up Springfield, but Homer says screw Springfield, and this reminds me of a scene in The Lion King, or of the story of the prodigal son, or the story of the Anunnaki. They're chased away and then they go back to fight for the people that denied them a happy life. Almost kind of in a way like Jesus as well. Like Jesus got denied by his followers and then he comes back to fucking fight for them and ascend to fucking heaven or his spaceship, depending on which fucking side of the fence you sit on. And is that what all this is about? Is that what Jesus was? An interdimensional jumper? A thread that, unfortunately, we don't have the time to pull on. In The Lion King, though, Simba went to the oasis and lived the life of Riley, but just how Alaska seems to be seen to be a paradise by Homer, and how in The Lion King it took Nala convincing him to leave and save the Pride Lands, which is what Marge is trying to do to Homer at this point. Maybe Homer is the story of an interdimensional time and spaceman, and this is about him returning to his homeland to save his own people, rather than the ugly alternative reality versions that we saw in the petrol station. Then there's even a little joke about the NSA, making fun of the idea of them writing down what literally everyone else is saying in the world. And then there's a scene where Homer is led by a spiritual leader, like Simba got led by Rafiki the monkey. Now this leads all onto the Lion King episode that I did, done it in a way. In The Lion King, the NSA, as regards into what the Simpsons are claiming, would be the fucking bird that was played by Rowan Atkinson, because he listens to all the messages and relays it back to the leader, doesn't he? Just like what the NSA are supposedly doing in The Simpsons here. It's the fucking same story, word for word. Well, not word for word, but very much so the same story in The Lion King as in the Simpsons movie. It's fucking weird, mate. Every film's the same. Anyway, Homer's led by this spiritual leader, like I say, like Simba got led by Rafiki the monkey in The Lion King. Then Homer starts tripping balls and the trees start applauding him. So is that what natural weather was? Is natural weather the world's way of congratulating a good decision? And since the invention and implementation, which is fucking hard to say, of the HARP facility, everyone is just doing whatever they want because they think the storms, like genetically, or we've evolved to believe that the storms are an indication of a job well done, when in reality it's just some guy from another dimension, mate, messing with the weather in the hopes of growing some more produce to be able to transport it to their own dimension to sell it off for profit. And is that why in this dimension the Earth is getting lighter? Why else would it be able to float further and further into space? Now, just as a thought, could the oceans be the visible bottoms of the real-life domes? Is that how we're able to have tunnels, like the Channel Tunnel, because it's realistically just a tunnel between domes? But back to the film anyway. Homer takes a nap in the snow and then he's visited, like the heroes of other films, by an apparition in the sky. Even in The Simpsons, in an episode of The Simpsons, you get a scene where Bleeding Gums Murphy comes down and speaks to Lisa after Lisa's died. But in this, the boobs woman as she's known, she's not dead. She's very much alive. She's like some spiritual person with totem poles and stuff. And anyway, she appears in the sky and leads him back to his family by swinging her tits round in a circle. And his family, anyway, have been captured by the tyrannical government, and he tries to free them, but it backfires. So Homer tries to free his family by badly imitating their language, by trying to make a stop sign but misspelling it, and trying to use their machines. Now, maybe this is when the interdimensional traveller came home and had to try and remember his original world and how things work, because there's obviously going to be slight differences, isn't there, between the two? So maybe these slight differences are sort of like forgotten, like little, is the word nuanced? They're just forgotten about, and he forgot that, over in this dimension, stop's got a T in it, you know, for example. Anyway, these attempts show the subtle differences, as I say, between his original reality and what he's returned to, and the world that he's spent the last few years in. His family are then gassed and returned to Springfield, like that TV show, the TV show about the prisoner. We then see Homer use superglue to free his family. Now, I think superglue was originally made for combat in a jungle, so I'm thinking maybe this is a little nod to that. To the production of superglue being made, and that means that was it originally made for the Vietnamese War, possibly. I think maybe for Vietnam, to heal wounds there, because plasters wouldn't do any good because the infection had set in. So maybe the Vietnamese War wasn't to be able to test weaponry on people or to potentially build factories over there. But what if it was so that someone or something could maybe return home through a portal that is possibly located within Vietnam? Homer then speaks in a simple way with "Homer do good," posed as a question, which adds to the idea of this post-apocalyptic Springfield being a different world to what Homer has grown accustomed to. After Homer saves everyone, there's yet another reference to animal fucking. Santa's little helper says it did things no other dog should do, and that it'll haunt him forever. This is another reference to people having sexual relations with animals, a lot like how Homer wanted to kiss the pig, how Bumblebee Man kissed the donkey, how Santa's little helper is giving poor jobs now to survive. It's probably worth mentioning that when the dome shattered, it did rain down glass on everyone. So could this be to symbolise that when the world gets saved, everyone will get hurt or die, and it'll be time to rebuild. Because that's something that you see at the end. They're all starting to prepare timber to rebuild the world. And that's it, guys. That's I think all we're going to have time for. This was Pause for Thought, and I'm the world around you, and you're listening to Threshold FM. Later on in the show, later on the station, you know, we've got I think we've got HDR at 4. Jimmy will probably be on a bit later. I'm saying that I haven't looked at the thing because I've not had internet access, so I'm not sure who's on. There's people on. Fucking get on your app. The app's been updated. The website's been updated. Fucking go and have a look at it. I'll fucking see yous in a bit, guys. Well, I'll fucking hopefully yous will hear me voice tomorrow for mine and Jimmy's 2021 predictions on truth seeking on Threshold FM. I'll see you in a bit, mate. Cheeky little advert about halfway through, you know. Did you know that I've got a Redbubble and all that where you can buy yourself little stickers for your laptop or your skateboard or something, or shirts as well. Even if you felt, you know, especially weird, you could get a shower curtain with my face on it about 150 times. Obviously, I know no one wants that, but you got to have something different to offer, haven't you, that other people haven't got. Anyway, let's crack on with the show.